"Come in," called the professor. He filed away the last candidate's paperwork and yawned, taking a sip of coffee. Only 537 left to go. A tall young man in a navy suit strolled in with a wide smile stretched across his face. His shiny brown hair was dabbed with pomade and swept neatly to the side like he was from some 90s boy band. "Take a seat," the professor gestured. The young man nodded in thanks and sat on the couch opposite. He leaned back and surveyed the room. "Skeet Johnson?" "That's my name," the 17-year-old spoke with quiet confidence. Unlike the others, there was no trace of anxiety in his voice. "And you must be Professor Harvey Pierce." Yes, I am. Very pleased to meet you." He chuckled heartedly. There were always a few keen candidates every year who could recognize their interviewers by face, but it was still a pleasant surprise. "Now, Skeet, why do you want to study at our medical school?" "I was always interested in the human body. I collected textbooks and made anatomy models as a child, and as I grew older, I was constantly inspired by the works of great medical and scientific practitioners I studied. Watson and Crick's work on the structure of DNA, Darwin's Origin of Species, Barnard's account on the first ever cardiac transplant. Of course, these are just the classics. I'd read all their work by the age of 10. "Impressive," Pierce nodded. "Tell me, what do you read now?" "At the moment, I'm doing research into a wide range of areas. For example, computational chemistry for drug development and potential treatments for cranial neuropathy. I've read your research on immunological privilege of the brain. Some fascinating ideas you present in that. Must say I've become quite a fan. Where better to continue all this than here? An educational institute of such merit, the most prestigious place to study medicine in the world." "You do all this in your spare time, outside of school?" The boy nodded. His green eyes flashed with a wild passion. Pierce looked down properly at Skeet Johnson's paperwork. This kid had full scores on all his admission exams, 100%, a unique score out of thousands of candidates, not only in the current year, but perhaps a previous decade. Admission here was most competitive in the world, but this kid was positively beyond it. Pierce shook his head. Back in his day, 17-year-olds were graffitiing walls and scratching their ex-lovers' cars with Alcopop bottle caps. He took out a notepad and handed the boy a pen. "Drug development, huh?" Pierce smiled. "Tell me, Skeet, what is paclitaxel used to treat? Most commonly ovarian and breast cancer." His reply came without hesitation. "How would you treat spontaneous pneumothorax? Puncture a hole in the thorax to decrease the air pressure inside, then do CPR. Suggest a suitable lead to synthesize indinoprost. Cyclopentadine. Describe how you'd perform a prefrontal lobotomy." "You don't." Pierce chuckled as he flashed the boy a smile of admiration. What had the medical profession done to deserve this rare prodigy? He leaned forward. "Say you're a neurosurgeon performing some operation." "Mm-hmm," the young man nodded, listening intently. "How would you heal nerve endings that have been damaged in the operation?" "Damaged in what way?" "Scarred, perhaps." The kid paused for a moment, then started to laugh. "That's your job to find out, Professor, not mine. Wouldn't want to spoil the mystery for you." "You've read my papers, haven't you, boy? You know about my research." The professor's eyes were wide in awe. "How could I resist? You're one of the best neuroscientists in the world. In fact, I've read all the papers authorized by the professors here, every single one. Groundbreaking stuff." He paused, suddenly remembering something. "By the way, Professor, I read in one of your abstracts that you were conducting a secret experimental procedure of sorts. I thought that sounded incredibly exciting and mysterious. How's it going?" "That was a very old abstract. But yes, I do remember the mystery-shrouded secret project of my heyday. Everyone was talking about it back then, trying to guess what the hell we were doing. They've all forgotten about it now. Thought it was all a weird publicity stunt. To tell you the truth, it was abandoned." "Oh." The boy looked disappointed. "How come? Ethical problems?" Pierce smiled, beginning to wonder whose interview this was. Alright, since you're so interested, I'll tell you about it. A long time ago, my fellow researcher Jeremy Mansfield and I were the only two men working on this hugely ambitious project. Project Sub, as it was known to the public. Two flamboyant young academics with an unquenchable thirst for knowledge. We were working all day and night, each at the pace of a 10-man team. I dare say we were on the edge of a revolutionary breakthrough that could change the future of neurosurgery. The professor ran his fingers through his grey hair, temporarily lost in the memories of his youth. Then, Jeremy was diagnosed with advanced lung cancer. Even at the end of his life, he remained dedicated to our ambition and continued the research in his lab in Florence. He truly believed we could finish Project Sub. He was in hospital in Italy when he called me and said he'd finally made a breakthrough. He sounded so excited to come back and finish it together. The next day, Jeremy went missing. Records showed he never even boarded his flight, and nobody's seen him since. With him gone, there's no way I could continue on my own. We both worked on it together for over a decade, but in the end, he was the one that discovered the critical missing piece. He paused again and sighed. And just like that, after nature revealed her secrets to him, he was gone. They looked a very long time, but they never found a body. No traces of his whereabouts. Nothing. When I'm alone these days, I still wonder what really happened to him. I just hope he went peacefully. There were so many things I never had a chance to tell him. Wow, that's crazy. Sorry about that. The boy shook his head in sympathy. They both sat in silence for a while. You think he wanted his secret to go out with him? Perhaps. But I can't help feeling a little betrayed. Maybe he had his own reasons. Maybe there's something more important to him than scientific ambition. Like people he cared about. Places he wanted to see. Who knows? I guess we never will. The boy shrugged, making an effort at comforting the dejected old man, and glanced at the clock. Hey, Professor, this breakthrough. Was it something to do with the subject of your own research paper? All this work on nerve damage repair. Indeed, that was the missing puzzle piece, actually. The issue of healing scarred nerve tissue, joining nerve endings. That was the key to success in our experiment. Our final obstacle. I'd proposed ideas, he'd proposed some too, and we tested them on tissue samples, but they all failed. Damage took too long to heal, infections developed, entire neurons fell apart. He spotted a flaw in each one before the test even began, so he was doubtful any of them would work. He tried them anyway, and he was right every time. But that night, when I received his call, he sounded different. What did he tell you? The young man seemed engulfed by the professor's tale, inspired by the epic tale of their endeavors. He told me he'd developed a method and run some tests. They'd worked. Severed nerves had been joined in a mouse as cleanly as if they were born with them. He said it was remarkable. After the procedure, the tiny creature regained normal brain and motor functions in an instant. There was not a hint of doubt in his voice that it was a success. I was ecstatic at the time. I trusted his judgment and abilities more than my own. He was a very smart man. A legendary prodigy of the age, I suppose. So are you, Professor. Don't downplay your own work. It's some of the best I've ever seen. Thank you, smiled Pierce. The smile faded as he shook his head, the memories returning. He also said, he promised even if I didn't know it, we would meet again. Last words he ever spoke to me. I asked him what he meant. He was due on the next flight back. Of course we would meet again. But he hung up. It's unfortunate, I only realized now he probably meant in death. He was always a man of his word. Seems as if you were pretty tight with him, the boy sighed. The old man's resolution didn't seem to satisfy him. Would you want to say anything to him if you really did meet him again? Pierce glanced up at the clock and thought for a moment. Obviously, I'd like to ask him where he went. He laughed. I'd want to know what he found out in Italy. Maybe how he discovered it. Perhaps also whether he ever thought I was a burden on him. The boy shook his head. Don't worry about it, Professor. I've seen your work, and I've got no doubt your contributions to Project Sub were just as invaluable. I'm sure there wasn't a second it ever crossed his mind. Well, who knows? Those times have passed. I'm pretty happy in full-time teaching now instead of chasing new discoveries like all you young'uns. Too much for an old geezer like me. Never too old to dream. The boy's youthfully innocent smile was comforting to him. Pierce suddenly looked at him with curiosity. Aren't you interested in what our mystery project was about? Of course I am, but I know you're never going to tell anyone. At least, not someone like me. The boy smirked. You're so sure. You didn't even ask. Historical exceptions have been made for kids like you. You said it yourself in the 3rd review of Neuroscience. Details and findings of projects under development will not be revealed to the public unless conclusive evidence is successfully obtained. I'd like to believe you're also a man of your word, Professor. And I'd hate to be the one to disprove my own theory. You remember every word you read, sly little bastard. The professor flashed him a grin. Incredible. Anyway, I doubt I'd want to know. From the deets you've given me, it's pretty obvious your dodgy experiment was rather ethically questionable. They laughed. Two men of science on the same wavelength. You're a sharp kid. I've seen a few like you in my career. Remember, persistence and determination alone are omnipotent. Don't get too cocky and you'll achieve great things. The professor patted him on the shoulder. They stood up and shook hands. You've never been to Italy, have you, Professor? Pierce stopped. He remembered being asked the same question a long time ago. No, I haven't. Why'd you ask? You should go. The pizza's good. Pierce chuckled as the boy put on his coat. Nice talking to you today. I'll expect to see you soon, Skeet. Always a pleasure seeing you again, Professor. The young man strolled out of the interview room and down the university hallway, long black overcoat flying as the next interviewee entered nervously behind him. He pulled out a cigarette from his coat pocket and reached for his lighter.